me. Yeah. So what do you
Yeah,
say to
well,
that
yeah, and
about that?
nimbleness of thought is just like being able to change the way you think about something, and it surprised you, and it seems so easy and flexible, and but someone else listening to your story is just like, oh, I can't believe I think like when I started losing my hair, I remember thinking like, oh, I'm no longer attractive. This is the end of it. And then I saw a picture of Andre Agassi, and immediately I thought, oh, I could shave my head and I'll be attractive.
Mhm.
And I was able to just switch so quickly. And I was like, and I realized that is not everyone's experience. There's a lot more
Right.
like looking into the mirror sometimes is a big slog through people.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then I'm sure there's parts of myself that I'm not nimble in thought. It's going to take a lot of clunky
Hmm.
maneuvering and mental gymnastics to get over. And someone else could be like, it's easy, just do this. And it's like, I think that like doing yoga poses, sometimes people can do it and sometimes people can't. So
Right.
Fair
So
enough.
I know we're going to talk about INTJs today, but Joel read me something earlier, and I have a little bit of I have a speculation. And since we have a whole group that's gathered, and I have real time feedback, I'm going to kind of throw something out to the group, and then in the chat, if you would say what your preference is, I'd be very curious.
Ooh.
So, Joel said that he read recently or someplace, maybe it was, I don't know how recent it was, but that
Oh, on Twitter. Yeah, I found an article.
that when men are talking about their emotions, they prefer to sit side by side facing forward, almost like in a car. You know how like deep conversations happen in cars. They prefer to sit side by side and facing forward, whereas women prefer to face each other when they're talking about emotions. And here was my posit. I was like, I wonder if this isn't gendered. I wonder if it's actually a difference between introverted feeling and extroverted feeling. I wonder if people who have extroverted feeling as one of
Harmony.
their harmony as one of their preferred functions, they like to talk face to face when they're sharing emotions because now you're in energetic rapport. And I was thinking, well, I think that's part of the element of extroverted feeling is tracking my emotions, tracking your emotions, tracking how they're merging together, how they're creating a third entity. Like all of that stuff is it's a lot easier to kind of keep track of. Whereas if you use introverted feeling, maybe that's actually when you prefer to be sitting side by side facing forward, if it's one of your preferred functions. And that just means one of your first four, like in your car model, even if it's your, inferior or 3-year-old function. Because then you're not disrupting the signal of what's going on for you as an introverted feeling user, right? Like you get to maintain like a kind of a clean signal of what's going on for you, but you're sitting side by side sharing that back and forth. So I don't know. I could be not onto something, maybe I am, but those of you who know what your preference is, and both preference, what your type preference is, so that whether or not you're using introverted feeling or extroverted feeling, or harmony and authenticity is your one of your first core functions in your car model, and also whether or not you have a preference for facing each other when you're in an emotional interchange or sitting side by side facing forward. Almost like we're talking about another version of this would be like laying in bed side by side and looking up at the ceiling and having a conversation that way.
Yeah.
So
hmm.
What about you, Jonathan? Do you look directly in a person's face emotionally, or are you more side by side?
So I'm going to practice this thing where I don't feed into the person's thoughts and just
Fair.
try to give my own experience. And I think there's a dependence. If I'm trying to share a positive emotion, something that I'm proud of,
mhm.
then I do want to face you. I want to reflect back to you and I want to amp up the rapport. But if
Mhm.
there's a hint of shame, I want to be in a dark room. Like I
Mhm.
do not want to face the person. So
Ooh, so
that's the nuance, particularly for
mhm.
me, that if there's a hint of shame in the emotional interchange, I would much rather not look at your eyeballs.
Oh,
Well, I could
yeah, but
extend
shame
that.
is the key.
I could extend that further then to say I think a lot of men are socially conditioned to feel shame around emotions. I think we're
Just in
we're
general.
we're taught,
Ooh.
Yeah.
to have a weird relationship with them. A shame that we're not feeling them enough, maybe from some people in society, or a shame that we're feeling them too much from like maybe a grandfather, like, don't cry, boys don't cry. Like it's all these messages that seem conflicting. And I think women
Yeah.
get a social conditioning. It feels to me, from my perspective, again, just perspective opinion. I don't know if I'm right, but it feels like women get a lot more permission and access to have interplay with emotions. And there's not so much shame about expressing them and hearing them.
Mhm.
Maybe not having them maybe would be shameful. I don't know. But it
Mhm.
feels like the shame lives in another category. What are people saying in the comments?
Okay,
on
so
membership?
we got Christy, ENFP preferences. I have introverted feeling and I definitely prefer to sit side by side. She says that she's also a 7, I'm assuming in the Enneagram. And so uncomfortable with heavy conversations.
Yeah.
And that gives me some feeling of distance from the situation. Joe says Joe's still figuring out his best fit type. He says, I look directly usually when I'm talking to someone. Most times I don't if I'm more concerned with something I'm doing. Valerie, who has INFP preferences, says if I need to process side by side, if it's happy fun time or I'm helping someone else process, I prefer face to face. All right. And so it's like, yeah, when I want to do extroverted feeling, I look face to face. And when I want to do introverted feeling, I'm sitting side by side. So it probably kind of depends on the
activity,
the conversation itself. Yeah.
So can I give my experience too, and this is to FI users of how I've experienced FI users. If an FI is holding space for me, yes, I'm getting that one-to-one interaction. And this is all in good fun. But if an FI is expressing their own emotions, I literally feel the energy sucking out of the room. And it's like, it almost feels like, do you need us for this? Like it's a soliloquy, almost like the spotlight has completely shown up on the FI user and it's like, there's no one else in the room.
Yeah, that tracks.
That's what it feels like for me. So I can imagine like if FI is like, no, I'm really going to express how I feel. Everyone's going to pale in the background to an extreme example.
Yes.
Heather, who has the ENTP preferences, says, I think this could be a pattern, but it depends on what I'm talking about. Sometimes eye contact, sometimes looking up. If I'm really excited, pacing around and stopping to point out ahas. Lisette, who has ENFP preferences, says it could do with emotional maturity or emotional intelligence. That's another factor in there, right? But I think there could be something in the theory because I know for me, using introverted feeling, I look away a lot while I'm processing and find a way to express it. But once I feel certain, then I'll look the other person in their eyes. So it's like, if I need to figure out what's going on for me, I don't really want to be in rapport with somebody else. I don't want to be doing this because now it's like, it's going to make it hard for me to figure out what's going on for me.
Yeah.
But once I know, now I can engage in the rapport thing because I've got it clear. So I bet in heavy conversations, I bet there's a lot of, I mean, this is why you probably move around, at least when we're fighting, we're like moving around the room a lot, right? We're like sort of, there's this dance that we do. I don't think it's choreographed, but it's like, you know, now I'm sitting on the bed, now he's standing up and pacing, and now I'm standing, and now he's laying down or whatever. Like there's probably moments when you get into rapport because that's the right thing to do. And then moments when you have to kind of break the rapport because you're like, okay, what's going on for me right now? I don't know when I'm in rapport with you.
Well, now I feel bad for my wife because I think all the time during fights, I'm trying to like reestablish rapport.
Right.
Are we trying to like TI disassociate? Like, give me some clarity. I'm like, no, let's stay engaged.
Well, especially when introverted feeling is so far down your stack. It's like, tell me what's going on for you, but stay in rapport with me. It's like, I don't even know what's going on anymore. Right.
That's terrible.
Well, since we're talking about emotions, which is the INTJ's favorite topic.
For sure.
Absolutely. 100%. I can commit to that.
That's the one thing we know.
At least.
And dancing.
Dancing.
That's true. Dancing, emotional expression through interpretive dance. If there's any activity that is more INTJ, those are the activities.
That's right.
As far as I'm concerned. So welcome, by the way, to everybody that's part of the membership this week, Personality Hacker Plus membership. This is our quest call for the week. We also have some guests, INTJ guests that we've invited just for this call to just see what this whole membership thing's about. So welcome. We're glad you're here. If you're joining us on Zoom to be part of this discussion today, what's going to happen in a moment here? We're going to watch a short clip from an upcoming Personality Hacker podcast. We're talking about self-love. We're in the middle of a series of self-love, and we're talking about how every one of the 16 personality types can love themselves. And we've been through a bunch of types. We're landing this week on the INTJ personality type. And what we've done is we've gone into our Personality Hacker owner's manual for INTJs, and we pulled out the car model of personality, and we lay the cognitive functions of the mind of the INTJ into that car model. And in this podcast, we talk about the expectations that you as an INTJ can have for each of the 4 mental processes you use, and the expectations in what you can put more effort toward, or what you can reasonably expect parts of you to show up like, right? And I made the joke about emotions as an example. The emotional access point for INTJs is that 10-year-old, technically called a tertiary process of introverted feeling. That's its technical name. We've nicknamed it authenticity. That's the part of an INTJ that is tuned into emotions, but it's more tuned into its own emotions, right? The emotions of inside the personality. And this is something we talk about in this podcast about the proper expectations for that. Can we expect an INTJ to understand the social situation, build rapport elegantly, and always have the energy to do that let's have some reasonable expectations about what INTJs emotionally can connect to. It doesn't mean they don't have capacity. It doesn't mean they can't step into that at times. But in this podcast, we talk about that. Opening up the channels for self-love. That's what we're doing in each one of the types. So for today, it's INTJ. We're going to watch a clip. We're going to come back and discuss it as a little bit of a community here on Zoom and on the open live stream channels. And then our membership group is going to go into breakout rooms where we're going to talk about this in small groups, come back and do some journal prompts to apply it to the self and see what's coming up. And then find an action or a what we call a personality quest for the week to go and just see what's going on in the real world, not just the theoretical world, but let's go test some stuff. Let's go try this out in our real lives and get some feedback from that. So that's where you have found yourself if you are here joining us today. Welcome, welcome. Joel, Mark, Witt, Antonia, Dodge, Jonathan Harden. Today producing is Karina Gunyan. Are we ready to go to that clip or we have more set up for it?
I think you did a good job.
I did pretty good.
That's right. That was a good transition.
I hope the INTJs approve. Let's go to the clip. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Just a short clip from this podcast. We'll be back to talk about it right after this. And in the meantime, put in the comments how you like to express emotions, face to face, side by side. What does it look like for you? Love to hear from you.
So driver, INTJ drivers.
All right.
What does this look like?
All right. So introverted intuition, or what we call perspectives. So as you mentioned, this is a function that is, well, what it's doing is it's processing patterns. That's what it's doing, right? Intuition is effectively advanced pattern recognition and imagination. It's simulation, because it's, by definition, it's not reality yet. It's an intuition. It's a concept, an abstraction. And since it's introverted, it means that that these intuitions are being processed inside of the mind, right? They're being kind of like run or ruminated upon all the time. So they end up taking a couple different qualities, these simulations. One is running simulations into future patterns, like what's going to happen down the road. And another one is running simulations of what's going on in other people's minds, like what are the patterns that are happening for other people. So like you said, it's shifting perspectives. And running simulations and shifting perspectives is basically understanding direction, right? When you run a simulation into the future, what's the point? The point is what is the direction that I or others should be heading or will inevitably be heading. And if I'm looking at this, maybe I'm trying to solve a problem and I'm seeing it from all these different angles, what's the best angle or direction I should be looking at it from? So for this function, because it's a driver, because it is the sort of the key to the whole enchilada for a lot of INTJs, the expectations need to be very high, right? They need to have very high expectations for themselves in this function. That can sometimes be a bit of a challenge because this function isn't always warmly received by others. It can feel a little magic thinking. It can feel like the person using it has access to information that they shouldn't have access to because they just kind of figured it out. Or they patterned it. And so it doesn't always get a warm reception. And so some INTJs feel like they need to diminish it or throttle it or only use it in very specific contexts. Maybe in my work, when I'm trying to solve a problem, I can use it then. Or maybe, when I'm trying to figure out where a relationship is going, I can use it then. But not everybody is interested in what is, the result of that processing. But regardless of that, it doesn't matter. The INTJ still needs to have high expectations of it, and they still need to give themselves permission to use it as often as possible, because it can't just be used, it has to be exercised. So what does exercising intuition look like, right? Well, it means not just insights about the future, but planning, right? So if you get an instinct or an insight rather about what is going, where we're all headed, what is your plan for that, right? Where do you see yourself in that simulation? It's not just I saw it coming down the road, right? It's not uncommon for people with INTJ preferences to have what's called a Cassandra complex, which is this idea of warning people about what's about to happen and nobody listens to you. So that's pretty common to have the Cassandra complex, but where did you put yourself in all of that, right? Like when you saw something coming, what was your plan for it? Did you have enough faith in your pattern that you took action based on it? You didn't just speculate on it. So high expectation also includes the faith to be able to make decisions in your life that align with those predictions.
Yeah, I would also say that giving yourself the platform or the container to be weird is another high expectation for this. I mean, it's a very intuitive function. And sometimes we get the messages, particularly INTJs, that, don't rock the boat, don't be too weird out of society's expectations of you. And so you diminish your own expectations of the self. But there's a lot of imagination. Our friend and colleague, Dr. Dario Nardi, is an INTJ. And we've seen him over the last 10 years become very creative and unleash this part of himself. He used to work at UCLA and used to give talks at like Google and very professional, wearing a shirt and tie kind of energy. And over time, we've seen him allow himself to do things like active imagination, Jungian's active imagination, or he went and trained as a shaman in the Norwegian shaman tradition. And he started tattooing his body in certain ways. Like he just really started embodying this present kind of abstract. He's got like different symbols tattooed on his body. He's gotten to symbology. So allowing yourself in not just in a hobby way on the weekend, but like in a real way, embedded throughout your life, the intuition to come out and to be a little weird. I think that's a proper expectation. Now, some people are like, I can't do that. My context won't allow it. I have to still wear the shirt and tie. Well, obviously you have to do what you have to do, but there's probably more availability for you to be a weirdo in your life than you're giving yourself permission for right now.
Right. I would say another way of defining that high expectation is don't keep your mental playground too small.
There you go.
Right. Like be willing to add sort of out there philosophies or things that are not, like maybe more diverse than you're used to. There's a richness in things like, say, archetypes, or a richness in a variety of philosophies. Sometimes dipping your toe into more metaphysical understandings. That doesn't mean that you have to believe them. It's not an act of belief. It's more of an act of playing.
Yeah.
And it's allowing yourself to expand your visions, right? Expand the territory inside of yourself. When the playground is too small, it means that you now deal with some tunnel vision, which is that's one of the results of keeping your introverted intuition, your expectations too small. If you're not willing to play with more diverse ideas, if you're not willing to play with more textured sort of outside the box concepts, then what ends up happening is this function ends up creating some tunnel vision, and then it can't see outside of its own reality. Like the thing it does the best, which is shift a bunch of perspectives. The perspectives are very few, right? It's shifting between just a few perspectives. And the magic of being able to see well into the future, well, you can't really predict with any, certainty, because there's a bunch of information that you're not willing to take into account because you can't see outside of this narrow way of looking.
Yeah.
So part of setting high expectations is expanding that playground of simulations, is expanding the playground of concepts and philosophies, and being willing to play, right? Because it's intuition. It's not like, we'll get to introverted feeling pretty soon. Introverted feeling being like, what are my values, right? What's important to me? What are my what am I going to stand for? That's not what this function is. This function is like, what am I seeing, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's my vision? What are the patterns that are happening? So being willing to play with a lot of different diverse perspectives and philosophies and concepts and abstractions, all it means is that becomes better, right? It just becomes a much, much better at doing its job.
Well, and I think that it's nice to expand that and be able to use it more to determine, okay, where do I see this thing running? What is that other person's perspective? And also the imaginative, like almost world building or creativity that can come from it. And I think if you're an INTJ listening, there's a part of you that's secretly like, oh my gosh, I wish what they're talking about, I'm so excited about that. That actually sounds really exciting to me. Can I? It's basically a permission thing, I think, to expand it. On the other side of that, though, sometimes there's an expansion, how do I say it? Actually, or it's an expectation of not believing this too much. Like you said, that tunnel vision. I think that's really the lever here. So I've had INTJs tell me, this is weird, but they've said, yeah, I've sat down to a romantic dinner date with somebody. The moment they opened their mouth, I knew within 10 seconds, I'm not going to be with this person. And now I just want to end the date and go on with my life. And I'm like, you know that much information from 10 seconds of seeing them talk? Now, maybe you're right, but maybe get more data before you just make that jump, like that much of a tunnel vision jump, right? So that's all the extreme on the other side, right? Where the expectation is like, let it go a little longer, get more information, let the patterns emerge more, stress test them, like contest them with other patterns or other things, other information you're seeing. Don't just trust your first instinctual intuition. Now, it can serve you well. I'm not saying diminish it. I think you should have high expectation for it to work well for you, but make sure you vet it too. Yeah,
the surface level insights, that's not what we're looking for, right? It means a true process. When you look at the other introverted functions, introverted thinking, or accuracy, what TP types use. If as a TP type myself, as an ENTP, I have the phrase "don't believe everything you think" at the forefront of my mind, because my brain comes to conclusions and with some certainty pretty quickly. Like I'm like, oh, I know what I think about that. And that's always a challenge. It's like, well, maybe you don't. Maybe there's a lot more information in there that you should be considering. And so I pause and then I work through the logic, right? And so, and that's labor intensive, by the way. So in a similar way, showing high expectations for intuition means don't believe your first insight, right? Like put it through a couple different filtration processes. And like you said earlier, you said an INTJ will be like kind of excited by this idea of like, can I do that? But there's also a lot of INTJs that are the opposite of excited by that. They're actually threatened by it. Yeah. Right. Because not playing with too many concepts is how they get to pick a worldview and stick with it. Yeah. And having high expectations of this function means that you don't, like, you still get to pick any worldview you want, but it becomes difficult to unsee certain things. And the more texture you put in, like if there's nothing conceptual that's off the table, if you're willing to play with anything conceptually, suddenly it's hard to unsee some of the patterns that are really coming up. And so the smaller the playground, the safer it is, right? It's kind of like they did a study about children on playgrounds, and they noticed that if there was a fence up, kids would go all the way to the fence to play. Like they basically leveraged every space of the playground. But if there was no fence, kids stayed much, much closer to the center of it because they weren't sure how far out they could go. Yeah. And if we put sort of tight fences around what we're willing to conceptually play with, it gives us sort of a sense of, it's like, I can go all the way out to the fence, but no further. And it's like, but if you remove the fence, suddenly there's a sense of uncertainty. There's like, well, what am I gonna run into? And the answer is, you're gonna run into every thought. You're gonna run into every concept. Like there's no need to fear. There's no need to stay in the center. You can actually play in all of that space. That's very abstract, but I think INTJs know what I'm talking about. So it's basically allowing yourself to, not allowing, it's requiring yourself to do more processing on every insight. It's not allowing yourself to just have an instinct or an insight and go, okay, that's what's going to happen, and just make those assumptions. And I think it's also recognizing that your insights, like the plans you're building, that they at some point, like in order for them to be anything other than just personally interesting or something that like tapping into an interest, they actually can be valuable to the outside world. So at some point, having a high expectation is going, how do I take this from inside of my mind and how do I build something or apply it or turn it into something that other people can interact and engage with? Part of the reason why this function doesn't always get a warm reception is because other people aren't sure how to interface with it. So getting to a place where you can communicate, that's a high expectation. The high expectation is, how do I communicate some of these visions to other people? How can I interpret it? How can I make it accessible? And part of that also means that the world might push back a little bit, but you want that. You want to have a little bit of pushback. You want to have some of your ideas or concepts refined through a push-pull relationship. So high expectations actually just, it means that this isn't just yours for you, even though it feels that way. This is something that you can make an impact around.
There's a quality of emergent joy that an INTJ that is showing themselves love and receiving it and has all these expectations in place. It's an emergent joy that they show up to the world with. It emerges from them and it showcases to others, and other people enjoy being in their presence and interoperating with them. I think our friend and colleague, Dr. Dario Nardi, has this in spades. I think he's done a lot of development, and when you're with him and you're in a present moment, he doesn't really say anything mean about other people. He doesn't have a divisive view of the world or politics or anything. He's got his opinions. He doesn't really share them outwardly. He just allows this emergent joy to come from him. And people really enjoy being in his presence because of it. And it's because of the work he's done. It's because of the expectations he set. It's because of how he moves the world. Now, everybody's got their flaws and their challenges and all that, but I think he's a good example of that. And I know that we know other INTJs in a similar vein, Antonia.
Yeah. And I think the reason why, I mean, that might be surprising to some that we would say this is the quality or characteristic we've chosen to highlight what an INTJ that has cleaned all the signals. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
The reason why we can say it's a characteristic that is generally not applied to INTJs is this is somebody who has made sure that they're setting proper expectations with all four of those functions, right? Like their intuition, they set high expectations for their intuition, and they're not cutting themselves slack, right? In the strongest superpower part of who they are pushing themselves. They are making sure that they are not wasting any of their quality. And when it comes to their thinking function, that co-pilot of extroverted thinking or effectiveness, they're also making impact. They're showing up, they're modeling, they're candid, they're communicating in ways that other people can interface with. They might hate writing, but they have written, right? They've accomplished things, and they have set up their personal markers and metrics for success, and they're watching themselves accomplish it, right? Maybe not perfectly, but it doesn't matter. They've actually got something to show for their work. With their feeling function, they're not bottling up emotions. They're not projecting their stuff onto others, and they're getting in touch with what's important to them and true and authentic, and building relationships built on authenticity, and allowing themselves to be imperfect and sort of watch themselves sort of navigate through life being a complex person having human experience, and they accept that about themselves. They're not demanding perfection. And then their sensing function is present. Right? It gives itself permission to be uncertain and still do things anyway, and enjoy moments and have a sense of joie de vivre. And so when all of those channels are clear, when all the signals of sending love to INTJs are clear enough so that they can receive it, that's why they have that joy, that emergent joy. It emerges from doing things over time while being present, while being true to the self. And I would agree. I think we have quite a few people who have INTJ preferences in our life that really model this, really show this. And I think it's something that the rest of us can learn from, right? Yeah. We can learn from somebody who might have originally been very stoic, or possibly very, kind of unbending and unyielding, and needed things to be a certain way, to a more relaxed version, to a version that doesn't have this curated persona that has to control people's image of how they think about them, or maybe one that hides because they don't want the world to see them yet. When they get to the other side of that, it takes time, it takes effort, it takes work, right? It takes a lot of, sometimes some pain in the evolution of self. And on the other side is, I agree with you, is emergent joy.
Oh, microphone. Welcome back, everyone. Standing in for Joel and Antonia until the microphone gets fixed.
There we are.
There we are.
Something happened with the production that I couldn't unmute myself. But we're here. Welcome back, everybody, to the main session. Person Hacker Plus, Joel Mark Witt, Antonia Dodge, Jonathan Harden. Producing today is Karina Gunyon. If you're just joining us, every week, Sunday mornings, we gather to watch a short clip from the upcoming Personality Hacker podcast. We often tune into personal growth concepts, the intersection of personal growth and personality types. How do we take all this stuff that we're into? Many people are interested in understanding others and the self through the lens of personality type. How do we make it more real in our lives? Not just through theoretical or academic study, but how do we make this real and tangible for our lived experience? And we think it's a fantastic framework to come alongside. It doesn't really tell us who we are in an identity way, although it's part of our identity. It's more of a tool set. It's our framework of being in the world, tuning into personality types and using them as a ballast and a guidepost or guidance system to help us make better decisions and learn information much more quickly or more fully. So we're talking about INTJs this week and self-love and how INTJs can show themselves love by clearing all the signals in their cognition and having proper expectations. We're going to open up the breakout rooms here in a minute. Before we do, I want Antonia, Jonathan, jump in here, make some comments. What's coming up for you as we talk about this self-love concept with INTJs specifically?
Well, I was just thinking the INTJs I've seen at live events like the PT 101 events, profiler training, or PLP. I'm thinking every single one of them has danced spontaneously sometime. And I've just made a note of that. Like, oh, wow, kind of the life of the party. And that's been really cool to see. So I know we jest every once in a while that, you know, INTJs and dancing. But yeah, there's almost like this revival of joy. That's a good word. The revival of joy that I've experienced around INTJs in our community. And I'm very grateful.
Yeah. And I think the reason why those events like Personal Life Path and Profiler Training, I think why it can bring some of that out is because those events are their contexts where it requires more out of their preferred like introverted intuition or perspectives, or like the parts of themselves that might be a little bit like all of us to some extent have our driver functions a little bit on autopilot. We're not always pushing them and requiring more out of them. We use them. We have our preferred methods of using our driver function, our first function. And when we're in a situation that forces it to do a little bit more of a heavy lift, the context asks more of those functions, we watch ourselves do more, right? Like we watch our, it's almost like going to the gym and seeing how much we can actually lift. And we're like, wow, actually that's more impressive than I thought. I thought I was weaker than that, but actually I can do more. And I think in our series about self-love, the premise is sometimes the reason why we're not experiencing as much love or receiving as much love from ourselves as we could be. One of the things that might disrupt the channel is we have more inside of ourselves than we are forcing of ourselves. Like we're not always putting ourselves in contexts that show what we're capable of. We're not always pushing ourselves. We're not always like asking or getting that gauge of how much quote unquote we can actually lift. So when we're in a situation that just organically brings it out of us, which those events do, right? They're really fun and awesome and interesting, but they also ask a lot. And I think that's one of the reasons why you'll see types like INTJs suddenly do things that they're not used to doing, like have this moment of emergent joy that makes them dance because they're like, wow, I didn't know my introverted intuition could lift that much.
Yeah.
Well, and also I think INTJs spend a lot of time translating for other people rather than just going straight for the intuition. And that can be exhausting. And if you're taking the abstractions you have, and first of all, most people can't hang there, but the people that can, I think INTJs, their experience has been, I do a lot of explaining where I'm coming from and give all the frameworks of what I'm looking at and all the nuance. And I wish you knew more, person I'm talking to, because it's hard. I mean, I don't think they mean to be this way. I think it's like they wish that we all knew more because they have all this to communicate. And the exhaustion of just hanging with, catching me up, for example, when they're talking to me, I'll just use myself. I think this is experience INTJs have with me. It's like catching me up to where they are in what they're thinking. And some of it's just because it's internal, not because it's that complicated, but it's internal and they have to, and I think it's tiring. And so then you get to an environment where other people are interested in the same values and interests of you, like at a profiler training event where you're learning profiling and you're geeking out about personality types, which might be a subject the INTJ is interested in. They go, oh, I don't have to catch anyone up. We're on the same page. All my energy can go to starting here and going beyond. So now I've got abundance. Yeah, now I've got extra to spend because I don't have to start with a deficit. I think that's really what I believe a lot of INTJs are resonating with that personally. Not that the rest of us are dumb. I think I'm a pretty smart person. Maybe INTJs disagree. I don't know. You disagree with me too much, I'll vomit rainbows on you, stereotypically, INTJ. We do need to go into breakout rooms, though, now. Joel needs to stop joking about INTJs and vomiting rainbows before it makes them all go away with the stereotypes. Antonia doesn't like me joking like this. She was like, don't do that. It's too stereotypical.
Really?
Oh, I thought you didn't like it.
Am I the
Oh, maybe I misread that.
Just hold a scorecard, 3 out of 10.
Yes, I'll just be judging your performance as we go.
Perfect.
Okay.
That's exactly what I want. So we're going to go into breakout rooms right now. If you're part of the Personality Plus membership here on the Quest call on the Zoom part, you're going to be put into a breakout room with 2 to 3 other people, maybe 3 or 4 people. Karina's going to organize those. And in the breakout room, we're going to give you a discussion prompt to talk a little bit about what's coming up for you. When we come back from that, the live stream will have ended by then. It'll just be a private membership call. We're going to talk in a broader group about some of the things that people talked about in their breakout rooms. So you're going to go to the breakout room. When you come back, we're going to hear from, I'd love to hear from 2 or 3 people about some of the things that you all spoke about. Breakout rooms are great because you get to meet new folks. We're going to let the Zoom gods decide who goes into a room together. You get to cross-pollinate ideas and talk to new people. And it's a small enough group that hopefully in 12, 15 minutes, everyone gets to lean 12 minutes. Everyone gets to lean forward and share and open up the energy. So everyone gets a chance to talk to you, no matter how big the call is each week. Everyone gets a chance to express and connect, which is the point. And then we hear a little bit from the broader. Then we also have a journal prompt that we're going to give some folks and go into our quest for the week. If you're not part of the membership, but you're watching this somewhere online, you should be joining us for all of this. Personality.com/membership. Join and be part of this program with us. We'd love to have you every week for this experience. Oh, and don't forget the people that are members that are here before we go to breakout rooms. We have a deep dive coming up this week on Thursday. A special call on Thursday for members each month, and this is the week coming up. So we're excited about that too. So don't forget that. Put that on your calendar. It should be in your membership area when you log in. Okay, Karina, let's go ahead and open those rooms. Here's the journal prompt. Into this, or excuse me, breakout room prompt. That's what I meant to say. I read the wrong line. SI inferior, reading the wrong things. Where did I put it here? Breakout room prompt. Talk about the INTJ influences in your life. This could be people, organizations, activities. Like I talked about the INTJ influences in my life as an example, where I said, I think they're always feeling like they got to catch me up or catch people up often. And when they can find an environment where they can start at the same place, I think INTJs have a lot more energy capacity for that. So like if I was in a breakout room, that's the kind of thing I would say. That's the kind of energy that I see in my life. So what are you seeing? Maybe you are an INTJ. What comes up for you? What kind of energies do you play with? What is resonating from the stuff you watched in the podcast clip? What are the energies or INTJ things that you can see in your life? And it might be a specific person. Talk about that. When we come back, we'll hear from 2 or 3 people in the general session. We'll see you in about 12 minutes. All right. So as our membership folks are getting put into breakout rooms, we're going to make a few more comments here on the open live stream, and then we're going to say goodbye to you as well. So we got to go attend to the members. Again, you should be part of this every week, 11:45 a.m. here in the United States, Eastern time. We start a live call, membership call for all of our members. We initially broadcast on the open channels like YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn, all those, but the feed cuts when we have to go do more private conversations. And I think you should be a part of it. If you're interested in personal growth and personality types, understanding them more, or just finding other community people to talk with about some of these concepts, I think you benefit from this membership. So you can come over to personalityhacker.com/membership and try it out. See if it's something that resonates with you on a weekly basis. We also have a catalog, an academy that grows of training and teachings and deep dives. And Antonia has a book club that she also has, a premium podcast inside the membership.
Now, if you've ever said, I wish I had somebody to talk to you about the podcast, well, here's your opportunity.
Cheers to that.
Yep.
Yeah. So also in the comments, we asked the question at the very beginning about how you share your emotions face-to-face, side-by-side, but also this idea of joy, the word joy. What's the term we use for INTJs, Antonia? It's escaping me. The
Emergent
joy. Thank you. This idea of emergent joy. If you're an INTJ, how does that concept resonate with you? I mean, my guess is that most INTJs aren't going to be turned off by the idea. Like, I don't want joy in my life. That's terrible. I think there might be maybe cynicism around if it's possible to feel joy.
I don't think anybody actively rejects joy.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think anybody feels that way.
Like, nobody wants, I don't think anybody doesn't want joy.
That was my statement. I don't think anybody pushes it away. But I think people, when I hear that, sometimes if I heard that, I would be like, it sounds childlike and fluffy and like a nice statement, but it's like there's no real teeth to it. There's nothing to connect to around it. I think that's the thing I would be thinking if I heard this on the other side of the experience. I'd be like, that's just a term that it's like an ideal that I don't think is real for me. And I don't know if I could actually have it. I think these are the self-talk I would be having.
Maybe, but I think all humans experience joy at some point. And even the most dyed-in-the-wool INTJ has these moments. It's almost like a child. Like remember a friend who was an INTJ was having this like really serious conversation with you, and the two of you were talking, and then all of a sudden in the middle of his own sentence he goes, "Oh my God, puppies." And then you looked around and there were like all these little
Yeah.
puppies, and he's like, puppies. And it was just this like spontaneous moment of joy of like there being a bunch of adorable puppies.
Yeah.
And then as soon as that was done, he like right back into his like INTJ frame and continued the conversation.
Okay.
That's what I mean by like, it's like you're opening yourself up to these moments of emergent joy. Like you're opening yourself up to this, like to be present and to just kind of have these experiences that buoy everything up. It's like a boost of electricity or a boost of energy in the entire system. And I think when INTJs get burnt out, when they feel that they don't have a lot of energy, it's because they're missing more and more of those moments. And it's not something you just get to have. It's like, okay, INTJ, you should be experiencing emergent joy, so get on that. It's emergent. It's an emergent of a system running, which is why we started it out with when an INTJ is doing all these things around, self-love, which is effectively like working to be the best version of yourself, right? That's basically what we're saying. We're like, self-love comes from not disappointing yourself, not demoralizing yourself, not setting up systems that are like clearly not working for you or serving you. It's honoring your type preferences, doing what you can in setting high expectations in the right areas and setting reasonable expectations in areas that if you have too high of expectations, you're going to demoralize yourself. It's like set up your life well, set your expectations well, and then you're going to get a lot more of those moments, and that will give you boosts of energy.
I don't remember. Did we go into this in the podcast itself? I can't remember. We should have. I'll put it down here. Like we've talked about this other places. I think in some ways, this idea of emergent joy for an INTJ is very important. The word emergent is more important than joy. And the reason why is in our coaching and our experience working with many INTJs, we've noticed that often INTJs can spend a lot of time, resource, and energy trying to predict how they will feel in the future.
Yep.
They try to almost contain and control environment and situations and interactions with people, assuming that they're really good at predicting how they're going to feel on a timeline of a time that's, henceforth or whatever.
Yep.
So I think the word emergent is very important because it says you can't always know, kind of that example I think I gave you in the show about going on a dinner date with someone. They say a few sentences and I'm not going to be with this person. Sometimes that's based on trying to predict how that person will make you feel in the future. And I don't think that's always a good gauge. I think INTJs can tune into that and have a sense of it with experience. But what if you were surprised? And I think you actually are. Even if you try to predict how you're going to feel, what ends up happening is instead of actually predicting it and landing how you'll feel in that moment, you just shrink everything down to a much controllable frame. So you have very little variance on how you'll feel in that moment. So that removes the expansion where all the emergent joy can come from.
Right.
So keeping all the control and everything really tight. Now you don't have the emergent joy showing up.
Well, when we predict something, we want to be right in our predictions. And so basically we're like, we're validating our own prediction if we predicted how we're going to feel a certain way.
There you go.
And so we'll make it so. And then that's the shrinking. And I think that's a pretty valid point because we have an INTJ friend who said, sometimes I find myself caring about people and I didn't know when I started caring. Like, when did I start caring about that person so much? And it snuck up on them.
It was emergent.
That's right. So trying to predict how one will feel in the future is a game that INTJs really try to play. And it's something that they're not as good at as they think they are, perhaps because every time they've been right, it's because they ensured they were right. And so
they found the perspective afterward that they were right.
Right, exactly. And so being able to predict future things, like marrying it with your extroverted thinking, I mean, I find that there's a lot of those predictions that an INTJ can take to the bank, right? Like, it's like, you bet the farm on that one because you're probably right. Like, many years before marijuana or cannabis became legal, I had an INTJ friend was like, I think what's going to happen is when they legalize cannabis, I think they're going to have like these boutique stores and they're going to look like Apple stores. And they're going to have like all these products that are like, that are going to be like in really nice, like sort of Apple iPhone-like, packaging. And it was like, basically he described what cannabis dispensaries look like now. And it was years before it happened. So those can usually be taken to the bank, but your feelings.
Yeah.
And when an INTJ goes like, I it's hard for me to know what I'm feeling anyway. Like sometimes you're just not associated with it. So to predict feelings is even more of a heavy lift. So in that situation where you're going on a date, yeah, no, sometimes you just know, right? You sit across from somebody and you just know that like this is not the right person for me. But that doesn't mean that you can't like enjoy the rest of the date, right? To go like, well, this is a waste of time, close down shop, and then, you know, try to end the date as fast as possible. I mean, some people are obnoxious, but just this person isn't the person I'm going to spend the rest of my life with doesn't mean that I can't enjoy an evening, right? To get to know somebody and allow my emotions to be emergent. And then maybe I'll feel differently, right? Like if I just give myself space to feel differently, if I don't feel differently, great, I accurately predicted it. But if I give space, well, maybe my predictions aren't as accurate as they are, as I think they are. Maybe they're a little bit more sort of curated. And then, like you said, when you give space, now emergent feelings like joy are more available, and then you get that hit of energy.
Yeah. Mileage may vary.
Mileage may vary.
Obviously, we got to go here because
Yeah.
our members are coming back from the discussion groups to do a broader conversation here. Mileage may vary. Clearly, all INTJs are different. Like, you know, these are trends. This is type patterns and behavior patterns and things of that nature. Doesn't mean that you as an INTJ are specifically this way. I do just want to mention that if you are an INTJ, I'd like to go deeper into some of these concepts and you are drawn toward understanding the self to apply some of these things in your life. Again, you can join the membership of what we're on right now, but also we have INTJ owners manuals, personalityhacker.com. I recommend this course. It's a great little course to start the journey of really discovering the depths of your type in an applicable way and how it actually, you can use it in your life, not just understanding all of it in an intellectual way, but knowing how to grow parts of your cognition, understand why things are happening to you, the expectations you should have to be in a flow state, to find that joy and to allow it to emerge. Like all of these challenges maybe that INTJs face or the desires that they have, we address those in that owner's manual for INTJ over at our website. So I think it's a great resource. I'd encourage you to go get it and dive deeper into your personality and what it can do for you.
Okay, we got to go back into
We do.
do.
All right. Well, it was great hanging with everybody here on the live streams. We got to cut the feed and we're going to go back into our membership. You want to be part of this? We'd love to have you every week. Joel, Mark, Witt, Antonia Dodge with Jonathan Harden hosting and Karina Gunyon producing. Yes.
How would they be part of the membership if they wanted to?
I was trying not to give too many calls to action. I guess I can do that too. Personalityhacker.com. Go get your INTJ owner's manual. And then you go /membership if you'd like to join this membership. There you go. How's that? That's actually good. I should have done that.
Okay.
Thank you. That was my thinking though. I was like, I don't want to give too many places to go.
Okay, now we
Talk to you later. We'll see you /membership, personalityhacker.com. Joel, Mark, Witt, Antonia Dodge. Peace. Talk next week.